Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show. 001 Rebirth and Countdown. Character Template Construction. Construction completed. Monster Template Construction in progress. Construction completed. Player Template Construction. Construction completed. The career system is under construction. The task system is under construction. The rules of the game are injected. The digitalization of the world begins. Current progress, 1%, 2%, 3%, 5%, 21%, 34%, 57%, 82%. Hazy. Sumu seemed to hear a voice coming from somewhere in his head. Then, he woke up. Sumu, who seemed to be a newborn, seemed to have just woken up from a sleep, and was still in a dazed state, looking at the environment around him blankly. This is a wilderness. The sky was gloomy, shrouded in gray fog. Looking around, the only thing he could see was a large area of ruins and countless skeletons scattered on this desolate land. Even himself. Subconsciously bowing his head, Sumu only saw a pile of white bones. I became a skeleton? Feeling everything in front of him, Sumu's heart was at a loss, and he was a little confused about the current situation. At this time, the voice that came from somewhere resounded in his mind again. The digitalization of the world is over. Ethereal. Mechanical. Not the slightest emotion. When he heard this voice again, Sumu was startled. The confusion, doubts, and many other emotions in my heart were also gone, and the only thing left was shock. This is the system prompt? I traveled to the second world? Sumu is no stranger to the voice that came from somewhere. Or, every second world player is familiar with this voice. Second world is a game. From the moment you enter this game, this ethereal, mechanical voice, without the slightest emotion, will accompany every player. Because this is the system prompt sound of second world. The second world, perhaps. With a move in his heart, Sumu seemed to think of something, and Sumu said silently in his heart, "Attribute panel?" Next moment. A translucent attribute panel appeared in his field of vision. Name, Sumu. Race, Undead Race Skeleton. Level 1, 0/100. Status, Life 8, Magic 15. Attribute, Strength 0.7, Agility 1.2, Constitution 0.8, Spirit 1.5. Talent, Erosion, the only talent. Skill, no. Except for a player template and a monster template, the attribute panel that appeared in front of Sumu was not much different from the attribute panel he once had. Coupled with the system sound that had been with him for a long time, Sumu finally accepted the fact that he had crossed into the game world. Do not. Maybe it's not through. It's rebirth. Look down. Line by line, he scanned the attributes he currently owns, and Sumu's eyes finally stopped at the bottom of the attribute panel. That's a string of numbers. Public beta countdown, 90 days, 13 hours, 24 minutes. That is to say, I have been reborn from 10 years later to the present when second world has not yet been opened, and from a player in the real world to a skeleton in the game world. When coming to this conclusion, Sumu didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Sorting through the information in his head, Sumu came to several conclusions. 1. He changed from a player to a monster, and naturally lost the player's ability to resurrect infinitely. Second world is a real world, and once he dies, he really dies. 2. With a monster template, he is inherently in a hostile camp with the player. And the players with the title of fourth natural disaster, even if they are facing God. As long as they dare to show the blood, they will kill them to show you. 3. There are still 3 months before the public beta countdown, that is to say, before the player officially arrives, he still has 3 months to grow. 4. I have returned to the present 10 years later, and second world has not been officially opened, which means that the gods have not yet awakened, the game has not yet invaded, and the real world has not yet been destroyed. Yes. Destroy. Before Sumu was reborn, the real world was destroyed. Players change the game, and the game is eroding reality. 10 years later, when the game's erosion of reality reaches a certain level, the sleeping gods wake up. The world is connected, and the transcendent comes. Even with a decade of growth, players are still no match for the gods. When the gods above all living beings descended and appeared in the real world, many legendary players joined forces, and they never blocked even a single god. Subsequently, the world was torn apart and turned into ruins. The creatures in the real world, who believed in the gods, were taken to the gods' territory, the powerful ones fled to other planes, but they were wiped out just before the destruction of the world, and they turned into undead in this already broken place. The world wanders and wanders. And Sumu, even if he is already a legendary juggernaut at level 76, when that moment comes, the only thing he can do is to escape into the game world. While taking revenge against the gods' camp, they also endure the endless pursuit of the gods' camp. Public beta countdown? Haha. Looking at the string of numbers at the bottom of his attribute panel, Sumu couldn't help sneering. It is not so much a countdown to the public beta, but a countdown to the destruction of the world. With the experience of the previous life, Sumu knew better than anyone how scary the gods were. Not to mention now, even if the peak of the player's power in the previous life is increased tenfold and 100 times, it is still impossible to be the opponent of the gods. The destruction of the real world cannot be avoided. It can be said. When the countdown to the public beta of the extraordinary game, Second World, begins. In the real world, the countdown to destruction has also begun. 002 evolves from skeletons. The world is destroyed. Rebirth. After a long time, Sumu woke up from the tragic mood at the moment when the world was destroyed in his previous life. They come, the security. He has become a skeleton in the game world, and he must live well in this capacity. 10 years from this life, whether the real world will really be destroyed as he speculates, Sumu doesn't know. He only knows that the biggest crisis he faces now is the arrival of the player 3 months later. The fourth natural disaster is not a vain name. When the player arrives, all monsters will become the target of the player's mopping up. Not to mention him, a small skeleton at the bottom of the undead race, even high-level undead such as Skeleton King, Death Knight, Lich, and Ghost Queen might not be able to stop the siege of thousands of players. Upgrade. Advanced. Only when he becomes strong enough in these 3 months can he have a future, and only when he is strong enough to rival the gods. He is qualified to consider the catastrophe 10 years later. From a small skeleton at the bottom of the undead tribe to the point where he is not afraid of the arrival of players, he has 10 years of game experience in the previous life, and it is an almost impossible challenge for Sumu. Fortunately, there is always a way out. As early as the first time he checked his attribute panel, Sumu found a breakthrough in his growth. Talent. The talents in Second World generally refer to racial talents. For example, the elves have the racial talent of plant affinity, which enables them to easily communicate with the vegetation and hide in the depths of the jungle. The dwarves have the racial talent of forging, which can make it easier to forge higher quality equipment. The orcs have insane talent, can become mad after reaching a certain rank, slaughter unparalleled, etc. It is not uncommon for this kind of talent to be ubiquitous in a race. It can even be said that, except for humans and the undead from other races, most of the races in Second World have their own racial talents. Individual talents are different. Except for some extremely pitiful talents, most of the talents represent that individuals with such talents have great potential. And whether this individual can transform his potential into strength and truly grow up depends to a large extent on whether he can make good use of his talent. Unique talent. Erosion. Sumu didn't know where his talent came from. Maybe it was because he changed from a player to a monster, and his soul mutated, or maybe it was because he returned to the present 10 years later, and the world gave him a gift. He only knew that this only talent was him. Strong hope lies. Pity. There is no description of this talent on the attribute panel. Erosion. The role of talent can only be explored slowly by myself. Sighing silently in his heart, Sumu raised his head and looked into the distance. This is the burial place. As the gathering place of the skeleton family, it is naturally impossible for him to be the only skeleton buried in the burial place. The place where he was reborn was on the edge of the place where the bones were buried, where the countless skeletons as weak as him moved. In the depths of the burial ground, there is a stronger aura of death, and more powerful skeletons have also been born. Even in the core area of the boneyard, there are many middle-level and even high-level undeads such as skeleton warriors, horror mages, bone knights, and death knights. Here, just a starting point. Click. Click. A slight voice came and Sumu moved. From a player in the real world to a skeleton in the game world, he didn't feel any discomfort except that he felt light when walking. Even his vision was not much different from when he was a player. After walking a few steps and getting used to his current body, Sumu picked up a thigh bone from the ground full of skeletons and walked towards a skeleton not far from him. He is hunting. If you want to evolve from a skeleton to an intermediate or even high-level undead, hunting is essential. And in this burial ground, there is nothing more suitable as a hunting target than an incalculable number of skeletons. Sumu approached slowly. The skeleton he took as his hunting target was still standing there blankly. As the lowest skeleton, it had no memory and no consciousness. In addition to instinctively going to attack when it senses the breath of the living, it will only counterattack when it is attacked. And this, more convenient for Sumu's hunting. Step. 2 steps. 3 steps. When he was only half a meter away from the skeleton, Sumu raised the thigh bone in his hand and used all his strength to smash it towards the skeleton's head. Click. A crisp sound. The thigh bone in Sumu's hand was broken in 2, and the skull's head also shattered. Losing his head, the gray-white skeleton of the skeleton shook slightly and scattered on the ground. You killed the weak skeleton. You gained 10 experience points. As the skeleton fell to the ground, 2 pieces of information were refreshed from Sumu's attribute panel. Thanks to the existence of the monster template, after killing the skeleton, he does not need to personally take action to devour the soul fire that is the origin of the skeleton. The soul fire of the killed skeleton will be converted into experience points and automatically integrated into his body. Killing the lowest level skeleton will give you 10 experience points. In other words, as long as I kill 9 more skeletons, my level can be raised from level 1 to level 2. Not bad. But looking at the information refreshed on the attribute panel, Sumu's mood was a little weird. Because, after killing the skeleton, he clearly felt that the body left by the skeleton, that is, the pile of scattered bones, was attracting himself. Could it be, reincarnated as a skeleton and infected myself with some strange hobby? I was a little confused. In the end, he couldn't hold back the longing in his heart, and crouched down gently. Nothing strange happened. Sumu just crouched down and covered the pile of bones with his right hand, which was only a pale skeleton. At this time, he clearly felt a heat flow coming from the pile of bones and pouring into his body. The heat flow is small, but continuous. It lasted for half a minute. When the duration of this heat flow ended, along with a slight cracking sound, the pile of bones turned into a gray-white ashes and disappeared with the wind. It seems like all the valuable essence in the bones has been swallowed and absorbed by something. At the same time, Sumu's skeleton body has also undergone some changes. His bones seem to be thicker. The color of the skeleton has also deepened a bit, and there is a tendency to change from pale white to gray-white. Of course, this is not the biggest change. The biggest change, on Sumu's attributes panel. Name, Sumu. Race, Undead Race Skeleton. Level, Level 1, 10/100. Status, Health 10, Magic 15. Attribute, Strength 0.8, Agility 1.2, Constitution 1.0, Spirit 1.5. Talent, Erosion, the only talent. Skill, No. I don't know when. His 4-dimensional attributes have quietly changed. The agility has not changed, the spirit has not changed. His strength has changed from the original 0.7 to the current 0.8, and his physique has changed from the original 0.8 to the current 1.0. Look down. Sumu saw 3 pieces of information newly refreshed on his property panel. You have absorbed the essence of the bones, and your body is stronger. Your strength increased by 0.1. Your physique has increased by 0.2. The value added in the information prompt is exactly the value added by his 4-dimensional attribute. Turn out to be. This is the function of the only talent, erosion. The jawbone rattled. If it weren't for the fact that he was just a skeleton now and couldn't make a sound, I'm afraid Sumu would have laughed out loud at this sudden surprise. Unique talent. Erosion. If his guess is correct, the role of his talent is that when he kills an enemy, he can absorb the essence of the enemy's corpse and convert it into his own attribute value. The second world is a real world. It is also a game. Because the whole world is digitized by the rules of the game. What matters most in such a surreal game? Camp? Profession? Equipment? Inherited? Do not. The most important thing is the properties. The growth of life magic requires attribute values, better equipment requires attribute values, the advancement of professional templates requires attribute values, even the lost inheritance that can make people soar to the sky often has extremely high attribute requirements. It can be said that whether it is an NPC, a player, or a monster, the attribute value is the premise of everything. Besides, in such a real game world, 4-dimensional attributes are the most direct response to the body. Even a stupid pig. When its 4-dimensional attributes are piled up to the limit, it is a stupid pig god strong enough to compete with the gods. In addition to upgrading and advancement, there are very few opportunities to increase attribute values in Second World. And the erosion talent brings Sumu the additional 4-dimensional attributes beyond upgrade and progression. So talented, so skillful, how could he not be ecstatic? Sumu didn't swell, though. Even with his unparalleled talent, he still hasn't forgotten that he is now just a small skeleton at the bottom of the undead race and at the bottom of the entire game world. Before turning potential into strength and becoming truly powerful, wretched development is king. Picking up a leg bone again from the ground full of skeletons, Sumu walked lightly towards another skeleton a few meters away. Step. 2 steps. 3 steps. Click. No surprises. When the thigh bone in his hand was broken into 2 pieces again, the skeleton in front of Sumu's face was broken like the first skeleton, and the gray-white skeleton shook lightly and scattered on the ground. You killed the weak skeleton. You gained 10 experience points. Ignoring the system's kill prompt, Sumu squatted down again and covered the pile of bones left by the skeleton with his bone palm. A familiar heat flow emerged and entered Sumu's body. When this second pile of skeletons had also absorbed all the essence and turned into ashes, the new system prompt had also been refreshed from his attribute panel. You have absorbed the essence of the bones, and your body is stronger. Your strength increased by 0.1. Your agility has increased by 0.1. Click. Click. A dark, dark place where there is no daylight. A skeleton was walking on the ground full of broken bones. The skeleton is off-white. There is obviously no trace of flesh and blood on the whole body, only slender bones, but it gives people a stout feeling at a glance, which is incompatible with other skeletons on this land. This is Sumu. For several hours, Sumu hunted and killed hundreds of skeletons around here. These hundreds of skeletons not only brought him thousands of experience points, but also greatly enhanced his 4-dimensional attributes. At this time, Sumu's properties panel has become Name, Sumu. Race, Undead Race Skeleton. Level, Level 4, 32/400. Status, Health 38, Magic 15. Attributes, Strength 3.5, Agility 4.0, Constitution 3.7, Spirit 1.5. Talent, Erosion, the only talent. Skill, No. In a few hours, the level was raised from the original level 1 to the current level 4. In addition to the spiritual attributes, the four-dimensional attributes have been improved by 2 to 3 times, which has to be said to be a huge gain. But Sumu was still a little dissatisfied, because at the beginning, he was able to absorb 0.2 attribute value from each skeleton on average, and later, the attribute value absorbed from each skeleton was reduced to 0.1. Until now, he needs to absorb the bones of several skeletons to get the attribute value of 0.1. Erosion, the return of talent is decreasing. Actually, this is very understandable. This is the periphery of the bone burial ground. The skeletons that move here, even among the skeleton clan, the most trash monster race in the second world, are still at the bottom. Weak skeletons of level 1 to 3, normal skeletons of level 4 to 6. Strong skeletons of level 7 to 9. Even if it is a strong skeleton, its four-dimensional attributes are still terrible. Such as Sumu. His level was raised from level 1 to level 4, gaining a total of 3 attribute value increases. From level 1 to level 2, his physique increased by 0.5, from level 2 to 3, his strength increased by 0.5, from level 3 to 4, his physique increased by 0.5. That is to say, every time the level of the skeleton increases by 1 level, only 0.5 attribute growth can be obtained, and this 0.5 attribute growth is still random. With such a growth rate, even if a skeleton is upgraded from level 1 to level 9, the sum of its four-dimensional attributes is only 4 points higher than when it was at level 1. On average, the 3 attributes of strength, agility, and physique are about 1.3 improvements in each attribute. That is to say, aside from mental attributes, a level 9 strong skeleton's 3 attributes of strength, agility, and constitution are basically around the 2.0 attribute. Much lower than the four-dimensional properties of Sumu at this time. Sumu's erosion talent is essentially to absorb the essence of the skeletons he killed to strengthen his skeleton. When Sumu was weak, every skeleton here was as strong as him, or even better than him. Their skeletons are also stronger and stronger than Sumu's. The essence absorbed from such skeletons naturally enhances Sumu's skeleton body rapidly. It is displayed on the property panel, that is, the increase of the property value. When Sumu's level increased and his attributes increased, his bones also became stronger and stronger than those of these skeletons, and the essence absorbed from their bones was naturally not enough for Sumu's bones to increase rapidly. It is reflected in the attribute panel, which is the reduction of attribute value income. So, it's not that the erosion talent is not strong enough, but the bone essence provided by the skeletons can no longer keep up with the needs of Sumu, who is gradually becoming stronger. According to Sumu's calculations, when the four-dimensional attribute of a skeleton reaches or exceeds half of his own, the essence absorbed from the skeleton can quickly increase the strength of his skeleton. No doubt. Only level 8 and level 9 skeletons have this attribute. And in the periphery of the bone burial ground, even level 7 skeletons are extremely rare, let alone level 8 and 9 skeletons. Without high-level skeletons of sufficient level, he can only hunt normal skeletons and weak skeletons. In this way, the speed of his attribute growth will be greatly reduced. You need to hunt down a few ordinary skeletons or a dozen weak skeletons to get a 0.1 attribute value increase. It's time to go to the depths of the boneyard. Taking a look at his attribute panel again, Sumu carried a leg bone taken from a level 7 strong skeleton, and walked lightly towards the deeper part of the burial ground. The burial place is huge. At Sumu's speed, it took more than half a day to walk from the edge of the bone burial ground to the position close to the inner layer. Along the way, he killed a lot of skeletons. These skeletons didn't bring him many attribute points, but raised his level from 4 to 5, and even his physical attribute increased from 3.7 to the current 4.2, making him the highest one in Sumu. Item properties. Starting from the edge of the bone burial ground, the deeper you go, the stronger the aura of death. Same. The stronger the aura of death, the more powerful the undead can be bred. On the edge of the bone burial ground, level 1 to level 3 skeletons are the norm, 4 to 6 level skeletons are relatively rare, and 7 to 9 level skeletons are directly rare. But in the inner layer of the boneyard, level 7 to level 9 skeletons are the norm. With 4-dimensional attributes more than double that of a level 9 skeleton, Sumu did not hesitate. After reaching the dividing point between the outer layer and the inner layer, he walked straight towards the inner layer of the bone burial ground. Only, as soon as he entered the inner layer of the bone burial ground, Sumu stopped. Because a special skeleton appeared in his field of vision. LV9. Skeleton soldiers. The inner layer of the boneyard has a stronger aura of death than the outer layer, and it does not surprise Sumu that a level 9 skeleton is born. To his surprise, this is a skeleton soldier with a professional template, not an ordinary skeleton. Just as players can change jobs by completing tasks after reaching level 10, and obtain occupations such as Mage Apprentice, Warrior Apprentice, Assassin Apprentice, etc., humanoid monsters such as skeletons can also obtain occupation templates. Beast monsters also have corresponding attribute templates. Having a career template and not having a career template are two very different concepts. The growth of normal skeletons is only 0.5. Moreover, when the level is increased, the 0.5 attribute is randomly added to one of the 4 major attributes, which is full of uncertainty. The growth of skeleton soldiers, at least 2 points. Still a fixed attribute bonus. That is to say, for a skeleton soldier with a professional template, the strength growth obtained by raising its level may first be greater than the strength growth obtained by a skeleton rising from level 1 to level 9. When the player just arrived, this level 9 skeleton soldier was at least an elite monster. Level 9 skeleton soldiers. The inner layer of the burial ground. Looking at the skeleton soldier not far away that was much stronger than ordinary skeletons and held a bone sword and a bone shield, the green light in Sumu's eyes flickered slightly. He didn't know when the skeleton soldier got the job template. If it is the last few levels, with his 4-dimensional attributes far exceeding ordinary skeletons, he can still kill them and turn their bones into nutrients for their further growth. If you got a career template from the start, from level 1 to level 9, this skeleton soldier has gained at least 16 points of attribute growth. Coupled with the fixed attribute growth method of the skeleton soldier, the strength of this skeleton soldier may far exceed himself. Can't be careless. Silently reciting a sentence, Sumu's heart has a retreat. With the talent of erosion, as long as he kills a few more strong skeletons in the inner layer of the boneyard, his 4-dimensional attributes will grow rapidly again. At that time, it will not be too late to harvest this skeleton soldier again. Only, just when he was about to leave, the skeleton soldier not far away suddenly turned around and looked in the direction of Sumu with its green soul fire eyes. The skeleton soldier found him. Next moment, before Sumu could make any move, the skeleton soldier held a sword and shield and charged towards Sumu at a very fast speed. Retreat, it is impossible to retreat. The speed of the skeleton soldier's charge was a few points faster than Sumu's own speed. Turn around and flee, and sooner or later you will be caught up. So, let's fight. In his heart, Sumu held his thigh bone with his right hand, grabbed a broken skull from the ground with his left hand, and rushed towards the direction the skeleton soldiers were attacking. 10 meters. 5 meters. 3 meters. When the distance between the two was only 3 meters, the broken skull in Sumu's left hand smashed towards the skull of the skeleton soldier, and the thigh bone in his right hand smashed towards the skeleton soldier's spine. Zhung. A soft sound. Broken skulls do nothing. Not only did it not hit the skull of the skeleton soldier, but it was easily smashed by the bone sword and turned into pieces that filled the sky. Even the thigh bone that Sumu swung towards the vertebrae around the skeleton soldier's waist was blocked by the bone shield in the skeleton soldier's hand. But at this time, the biggest difference between Sumu and skeleton soldiers is not attributes, nor professional templates, but wisdom. He used to be human. Even if a skeleton is reborn, it retains the memory and wisdom of being a human. His opponent, even with attributes and templates beyond Sumu, is only fighting with the instinct of his body. When the attack of the broken skull and thigh bone was blocked by both, Sumu turned his body sideways and kicked the skeleton soldier's leg bone with a neat kick. Click! Accompanied by a crisp sound. The skeleton soldier's leg bone was directly kicked down by Sumu. Losing a leg bone, the unbalanced skeleton soldier fell to the ground, struggling to get up. At this time, Sumu lifted the thigh bone in his hand and used all his strength to smash it towards the skull of the skeleton soldier. Boom! 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 A dull percussion sounded on the wilderness. When the thigh bone in his hand was broken, Sumu lifted the remaining half of the thigh bone, pierced the sharp bone stubble into the eye socket of the skeleton soldier, and vigorously stirred. Soul fire shattered. The skeleton soldier's struggling skeleton also fell apart at the same time and fell to the ground. You killed the skull soldier. You gain 100 experience points. When the system prompted to refresh from the attribute panel, Sumu breathed a sigh of relief and lost the long broken thigh bone in his hand. This battle may seem short-lived, but in fact it is extremely dangerous. After just a short contact, Sumu could be sure that the 3 attributes of this skeleton soldier's strength, speed and agility all surpassed him. Coupled with the bone sword that can easily smash skulls. As long as he is hit once, I am afraid that it is not the skeleton soldier lying here, but himself. Fortunately, he won. Next is harvest time. Leaning down adeptly, Sumu covered the pile of bones far stronger than himself with his bone palm. Erosion, talent activated. Next moment, a thick stream of heat poured out of the pile of bones and began to strengthen Sumu's skeletal body. At the same time, a series of system prompts are also refreshed from his property panel. After a full 2 minutes, the heat flow disappeared. When the skeletons belonging to the skeleton soldiers turned into a plume of ashes, Sumu also opened his attribute panel in a timely manner to check his gains from this battle. You have absorbed the essence of the bones, and your body is stronger. Your strength increased by 0.5. Your agility has increased by 0.3. Your physique has increased by 0.4. Your spirit increased by 0.1. You have obtained the transfer information of the basic profession template skull soldier. If you're enjoying my content, please consider donating a coffee or checking out my shirts on TeePublic. The skeleton of a skeleton soldier gave Sumu a 1.3 point growth in attribute value. It also includes 0.1 points of spiritual attributes. Mental attributes may be the most important attributes of the skeleton family. At least in the early days. The skeleton family is either descended from other races, this kind of skeletons are generally middle and high level, or the dead skeletons are born under the nourishment and nurture of the breath of death day after day, low-level skeletons. Regardless of the mid-level and high-level skeletons, those low-level skeletons like Sumu have only a pitiful 0.1 for most of their spiritual attributes. The spiritual attribute of 0.1 means that they have no memory, no consciousness, and they do not actively hunt other skeletons to improve their level of consciousness. The increase in their level is more due to the nourishment and nurturing of the ubiquitous aura of death in the bone burial ground. Such skeletons naturally cannot provide Sumu with spiritual attributes. If Sumu was an outlier in the skeleton family, the skeleton soldier he killed was a genius in the skeleton family. Maybe it was because the initial value of the mental attribute was relatively high, or maybe it was because the 0.5 attribute was randomly assigned to the mental attribute when the level was increased, so that the skeleton soldier had the concept of self and upgrade, and gradually grew up. Because of this, when other skeletons only have instinct, the skeleton soldier will actively hunt, and when it finds Sumu, it will attack Sumu as soon as possible. Of course, that's not the point. The point is, on this skeleton soldier, Sumu has obtained the job transfer information of the job template. Template, Skeleton Soldiers. Rank, Basic Occupation Template. Bonus, Health plus 50, Strength *1, Agility *1, Constitution *1. Ability, Skeleton Armor. Bone Armor. As the basic combat unit of the skeleton family, each skeleton soldier has the ability to convert skeletons into weapons. as Sumu guessed. In the skeleton family, there are two completely different concepts, whether there are occupation templates. A 50-point life bonus directly doubles Sumu's life. This is also because his physical attributes far exceed other ordinary skeletons. If you put it on other skeletons, the 50 points of life bonus means that their life has been doubled. The same goes for attribute bonuses. Every time you level up, the 3 attributes of strength, agility, and constitution are all +1, and the total 3-point attribute growth is 6 times the skeleton's pitiful 0.5-point attribute growth. Not to mention, the ability that comes with the professional template bone armor. This alone is enough to increase the strength of the skeleton soldiers. It can be said that if it weren't for the final blow to kill and shatter the absolute weakness of soul fire, the skeleton family, Sumu at this time would definitely not be a skeleton soldier's opponent. Skull soldiers. With the appearance of the career template, Sumu's mind also appeared in Sumu's mind about the transfer of relevant information. As the basic occupation of the skeleton family, the skeleton soldier's job transfer conditions are very simple. 1. The level reaches level 10. 2. Among the 3 attributes of strength, speed and constitution, 2 attributes reach 2 points. As long as these 2 conditions are met, it will be automatically transferred to a skeleton soldier. System transfer. If only one condition is met, you need to obtain the transfer information of the skeleton soldier before you can transfer to the skeleton soldier. And the easiest way to get skeleton soldier transfer information is to kill a skeleton soldier. Self-transfer. There are 2 ways to transfer jobs. The first one is fine. If you want to transfer jobs in advance through the second method, the difficulty is not that big. Either, like Sumu, he has far more strength than skeletons, or, luckily enough, he encountered a skeleton soldier who was incomplete or even dying frequently. No matter which way, as long as you complete the job transfer, you will achieve the leap of rank. From the most rubbish monster in the game world, the skeleton, to the less rubbish monster, the skeleton soldier, you have obtained the transfer information of the basic profession, template skull soldier. The transfer conditions are met. Will you change to skull soldier? When Sumu finished checking the relevant information of the skeleton soldier professional template, the prompt sound of the system also sounded in his mind at the right time. Resisting the excitement in his heart, Sumu chose to change jobs. Next moment, a stream of heat was born out of thin air and poured into his body. Immediately after, his skeleton body began to change drastically. Maybe a second, or maybe a long time. By the time Sumu woke up, his transfer was over. Compared with before the transfer, Sumu's skeleton body has undergone tremendous changes. His height has increased from a little over 1.7 meters to 1.8 meters, and the bones that make up his body are even more sturdy. It is still a slender bone, without a trace of flesh and blood, but it gives people a thick feeling. At this time, his properties panel has become: Name, Sumu. Race, Undead race skeleton. Template, Basic occupation template skeleton soldier. Level, Level 5, 117/500. Status, Health 96, Magic 16. Attributes, Strength 3.7, Agility 4.3, Constitution 4.6, Spirit 1.6. Talent, Erosion, the only talent. Skill, No. In addition to still having no skills, Sumu's attribute panel is already complete at this time. As for skills, Bone Armor is an ability, not a skill. Just as humans are born to breathe, fish are born to live in water. Bone Armor is also an instinct of skeleton soldiers, and it is more inclined to talents rather than skills, so it will not be displayed on the attribute panel. As for its role, Mind a Move, Sumu suddenly felt strands of bone essence flowing in his body. In just a few breaths, a large knife appeared in his hand. The broadsword is nearly 2 meters long. Except for the half-meter-long hilt in Sumu's hand, the rest is all the blade. The blade, which is more than 1 meter long, is completely pale, and it is completely condensed from the hardest bone on Sumu's body. Obviously it is made of bone, but the blade and tip of this big knife show a hint of edge. Bone armor, the condensed weapon is not a fixed style, but comes from the habits and will of the skeleton soldiers. From the moment of its birth, the weapons condensed into bone armor will become the exclusive weapons of the skeleton soldiers. And this odd-shaped sword in Sumu's hand. If there are players here, they must be able to recognize it. This odd-shaped broadsword, which is incompatible with the background painting style of Second World, is clearly a big killer that once appeared in the history of ancient China. In reality, the Mo Dao. Skeleton sword, strange knife. It can be chopped or stabbed, it can be picked or teased. Known as a knife cut out, the people and horses are split. If there is enough power to use, it is a big killer in weapons. As for style, Sumu doesn't care. Not to mention that he is only facing monsters now. Even if players arrive in the future, when the profession of blacksmith appears, countless strange weapons and equipment will appear in the game world. Besides, even if some players saw the skeleton sword in Sumu's hand, they would probably think it was an Easter egg in the game, and would not associate it in other directions. As Sumu's exclusive weapon, the skeleton mob is condensed from the hardest bones on his body. That is to say, the firmness and sharpness of the skeleton mob blade are directly linked to Sumu's physical attributes. When his physique attribute is only a few points, the skeleton sword may only be equivalent to the whiteboard equipment made of steel. When his physique reaches hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands, the skeleton sword may be comparable to epic equipment, legendary equipment, and even legendary artifacts. This is an exclusive weapon that can grow. With the skeleton sword, Sumu no longer has to worry about his weapons, let alone pick up the skeletons on the ground as weapons. Job transfer completed. After getting used to his current body, Sumu walked towards the deeper part of the burial ground. Just entering the inner layer of the bone burial ground, there is such a harvest. In the eyes of Sumu, the burial place at this time has also become a huge treasure, waiting for him to dig and harvest. When officially entering the inner layer of the boneyard, Sumu started hunting again. The four-dimensional attributes far surpassing that of ordinary skeletons, coupled with the big killer of the skeleton mob blade, made Sumu unfavorable in the face of countless strong skeletons in the inner layer of the bone burial ground. The bones were cut out with a sword. The enormous strength contained in it alone is enough to shred a level 10 skeleton and turn it into a pile of bones. Only skeleton soldiers who also have professional templates can resist a little bit. After killing dozens of strong skeletons and further improving his level and attributes, Sumu replaced the hunting objects with skeleton soldiers with more experience and attributes. Click. Click. In light footsteps, Sumu crossed a hill made entirely of broken bones. A skeleton soldier appeared in his field of vision. LV-13. Skeleton soldiers. Deep into the inner layers of the boneyard, skeleton soldiers are not uncommon. Being able to transfer to skeleton soldiers, the spiritual attributes of these undead cannot be said to be high, but at least they already have the concept of self and the awareness of hunting and upgrading. When Sumu saw the skeleton soldier also saw Sumu. There is no redundant communication. While discovering each other, Sumu and the skeleton soldier rushed towards each other at the same time. On the way to charge, the skeletons of both sides are ready to give each other a fatal blow at any time. Sumu's weapon is the skeleton sword. The weapon of this level 13 skeleton soldier is a two-handed greatsword. When the distance between the two was getting closer and closer, the two-handed sword in this skeleton soldier's hand had already been raised, and with the power of the charge, it slashed towards Sumu. Zhung! A dull clash sounded. Sumu blocked the skeleton soldier's blow with the skeleton sword. It is also a skeleton weapon, and it is also a weapon formed by the condensed bones of its own. When the skeleton sword and the two-handed sword confront each other, there is only a white mark on the place where the skeleton sword meets, and the place where the two-handed sword meets, but there was a small gap. This shows that in the attribute of physique, Sumu has surpassed this level 13 skeleton soldier. What's next? The mandible moved slightly, as if smiling. When the skeleton soldier raised his two-handed sword and was about to cut it down again, Sumu had already cut out the skeleton sword. Zhung. 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 3 consecutive clashes sounded. In just a few breaths, Sumu poured all his strength into the skeleton maw blade, and slashed 3 powerful swords at the skeleton soldier. The skeleton soldier was forced to be helpless, and could only meet the skeleton Modeo with a two-handed sword. With each slash, there will be an extra gap on the two-handed sword. After 3 consecutive slashes, the skeleton soldier's two-handed sword had 4 more gaps, like a saw. The 4th time, when the skeleton soldier habitually raised his two-handed sword and wanted to block the next slash, the skeleton sword in Sumu's hand slanted slightly, avoiding the two-handed sword, and instead slashed in the skeleton soldier's grip on his right arm holding a two-handed greatsword. Click! A crisp sound. Even a two-handed sword can't stop the edge of the skeleton maw blade, let alone a mere arm. When the skeleton mo knife slashed, it was the skeleton soldier's right arm that broke off and fell to the ground. Next moment, the skeleton mo knife was cut out for the 5th time. The skeleton soldier with only one arm could not raise the two-handed sword, and naturally could not resist the attacking knife. When the knife light flashed, the skull of the skeleton soldier suddenly flew up and fell to the ground. The skeleton soldiers are not dead yet. Although it was divided into 3 parts, head, body, and arms by Sumu, the parts of the skeleton soldier struggled to move, trying to reunite. Putting away the skeleton sword, Sumu walked to the head of the skeleton soldier. Without the body, the head of the skeleton soldier cannot move. But through the dark eye sockets, Sumu could still clearly see the vigorous soul fire of the skeleton soldiers in the skull. At this time, as long as Sumu made a knife, smashed the skull of the skeleton soldier, or smashed its soul fire, the skeleton soldier was completely dead. On the contrary, he spliced the 3 parts of the skeleton soldier, and the skeleton soldier will recover quickly. But, leaning down, holding the skull in his hand, Sumu thoughtful. The skeletons and skeleton soldiers killed by him, after being eroded by his talent, will be transformed into bone essence that enhances his 4-dimensional attributes. What if it was a skeleton soldier who wasn't killed by him? Can his erosion talent work on undead skeleton soldiers? If so, what effect would it have? Thinking silently in his heart, Sumu activated his talent. No heat flowed from the skull of the skeleton soldier and entered his body. On the contrary, when Sumu grabbed the head of the skeleton soldier and activated the erosion talent, he clearly felt something gushing out of his body and into the head of the skeleton soldier. Erosion, before the talent was activated, the skulls of the skeleton soldiers were still struggling. Even without the ability to move, the mandible of this dense skull rattled, as if it wanted to bite Sumu. When the erosion talent was activated, the struggle of the skeleton soldier's head slowed down. Until there is no movement. The process didn't last long. After about a minute, nothing was gushing out of Sumu's body, and the head did not generate heat flow into Sumu's body. At this time, a crisp system prompt sounded in Sumu's mind. You have gained control of the skeleton soldiers. You enslaved the skeleton soldier. You can rename the skeleton soldier. The system prompt that sounded 3 times in a row caused a shocking wave in Sumu's heart. Control? Slavery? Seeing the skeleton soldiers who had completely recovered from their hands, and even their bodies were lying on the ground obediently, no longer struggling, Sumu's heart was more than just a surprise. Enslaved skeletons? Is this the second effect of the erosion talent? As if to confirm the thoughts in his heart, Sumu pressed the skull head in his hand on the body of the skeleton soldier, and even picked up the broken arm and placed it beside the skeleton soldier. Soon, the skeleton soldier's body and head were refused together, and the broken arm was also picked up by it and reinstalled on the half-arm bone. In just a few minutes, the skeleton soldier who had been divided into 3 parts by Sumu was restored to its original state. Then, after fully recovering, the skeleton soldier just stood there, as if waiting for Sumu's order. Skull soldiers. How many steps forward? Click. Click. When this thought appeared in Sumu's mind, the skeleton soldier took a few steps forward almost at the same time. After completing this order of Sumu, he stopped and waited for the follow-up order. It's really enslaved skeletons. It seems that erosion is the only talent. There are still many functions waiting for me to explore. After several trials in succession, Sumu also figured out how much control he had over the skeleton soldier. When he concentrates, he can completely take over the control of the skeleton soldier and control the body of the skeleton soldier according to his own thoughts. In this mode, he's even able to gain vision from the skeletons. After exiting this control mode, he can also control the skeleton soldier by issuing commands. For example, let the skeleton soldiers follow you. For example, let the skeleton soldiers hunt by themselves. In this mode, Sumu's orders cannot be too complicated, and the skeleton soldiers will only terminate the execution of the previous order after issuing a new order or cancelling it voluntarily. In simple terms, Sumu gets a little brother who is completely under his control. In a good mood, Sumu walked towards the distance with the skeleton soldier he named Number 1. When he saw a level 9 skeleton, Sumu's mind moved, and Number 1 carried his two-handed sword and rushed towards the skeleton like a fly. A sword. The skull's head was chopped off by Number 1. Afterwards, it returned to Sumu with the head of a level 9 skeleton. Taking the skull handed by Number 1, Sumu activated the erosion talent again. After more than 30 seconds of erosion, the level 9 skeleton was also enslaved by him and became his second younger brother, but this time Sumu didn't name the skeleton or put the head back on its body, but threw it on the ground and smashed it with one foot. After taking a look at his attribute panel and finding that there was no change, Sumu asked Number 1 to collect the skeleton of the skeleton, and covered his already thickened bone palm on the skeleton. Erosion talent activated. No response. After completing these two inexplicable moves, Sumu ordered again to let Number 1 attack. Still targeting skeletons. This time, when he appeared in front of a skeleton, Number 1 did not keep his hand, and directly smashed the skeleton in front of him with a two-handed sword, turning it into a pile of bones. At the same time, two system prompts have also been refreshed on Sumu's property panel. Your servant Number 1 killed strong skeleton. You gain 22 experience points. After repeating the above action again, Sumu ordered Number 1 to return to his side, and he himself pondered. With these inexplicable actions and commands, Sumu is not aimless. He was testing the second function of the erosion talent and the impact it had on himself. First, the beheading of the skeleton I enslaved will not bring me the slightest negative impact. Secondly, after the enslaved skeleton is beheaded again, it will not bring me experience points, nor can it be absorbed by the erosion talent, bringing me attribute value benefits. Thirdly, when the skeletons I enslaved kill the enemy, I will also gain some experience points. However, the corpses of these enemies cannot be absorbed by the erosion talent, which brings me experience points. So, the green light in the eye sockets flickered slightly, and Sumu secretly said in his heart, "It seems that I don't need to carefully improve my strength according to the original plan to obtain a career template for the next rank." According to his original plan, after entering the inner layer of the bone burial ground, he would first hunt down strong skeletons of level 7 to 9 to increase his level and attributes. Wait until these skeletons are completely useless to you, then start hunting skeleton soldiers and continue to improve your strength. Step by step, upgrade your occupation from basic occupation to advanced occupation and elite occupation. This method of improvement will undoubtedly be very slow. The biggest benefit is safety. This is a real world after all, and Sumu has only one life. Before he becomes really powerful, Go is the real king. But after developing the second function of the erosion talent and obtaining the ability to enslave skeletons, it seems that he can use a faster way to improve his strength. Enslaved skeletons. Core of skeletons. Undead scourge. After all, in the player's cognition, they are most impressed by the skeleton family. Apart from the weak combat power of a single skeleton, it is the undead natural disaster that is ubiquitous and drowns all enemies in a huge number. The scourge of the undead is just a fantasy for the current Sumu. But at least he can piece together an army of skeletons. Click. Click. Light and neat footsteps sounded in the inner layer of the boneyard. In this land full of desolation and death, a group of skeletons are advancing. There are more than a dozen skeletons in this group. The skeleton in the front is sturdy, standing 1.8 meters tall, with an odd-shaped broadsword nearly 2 meters long pointing diagonally at the ground, either with a sword and a shield, or with a hatchet. Without exception, all the weapons are made of bone and pale in color. This is Sumu. From the time he captured the first skeleton soldier, he had been in the inner layer of the bone burial ground for 3 days. During these 3 days, Sumu hunted and killed a large number of skeletons and further improved his level and attributes. Whenever he encountered a skeleton soldier, he would swarm with his younger brother and crippled him. Then, enslaved, subdued. With the first skeleton soldier, taking the second one is much easier. With the second skeleton soldier, taking the third one is even easier. It's a virtuous circle. As time went by, Sumu's skeleton soldiers became more and more, and his strength became stronger and stronger. Later, whenever a skeleton soldier was found, he didn't even need to take action. The skeleton soldier under his command would charge forward, smash it in the first place, and hand it over to Sumu to enslave and subdue it. After 3 days of accumulation, the number of skeleton soldiers under his command has reached as many as a dozen. More than a dozen skeleton soldiers spread out in a mighty manner. All the skeletons in their hunting range, whether they are ordinary skeletons or skeleton soldiers with basic job templates, have all become their hunting targets. Countless skeletons were shredded and turned into experience points that poured into these skeleton soldiers and Sumu's experience bar. Numerous skeleton soldiers were crippled or enslaved and became part of Sumu's subordinates, or beheaded and turned into Sumu's experience points and attribute points. Now, 3 days later, not only the number of skeleton soldiers under Sumu's command has reached a dozen, but even his own strength has skyrocketed several times. Name, Sumu. Race, Undead Race Skeleton. Template, Basic Occupation Template Skeleton Soldier. Level 11, 234/1000. Status, Health 230, Magic 25. Attribute, Strength 13, Agility 15, Constitution 17, Spirit 2.5. Talent, Erosion, the only talent. Skill, No. Sumu's four-dimensional attributes at this time are more than double those of his skeleton soldiers, with an average level of 15. More than a dozen skeleton soldiers, coupled with his own strength far exceeding the skeleton soldiers, could have swept the entire inner layer of the bone burial ground. After subduing 2 skeleton soldiers again and increasing the number of his younger brothers to 16, Sumu walked towards the central area of the burial ground with his skeleton army, which was beginning to take shape. The central area of the bone burial ground is the largest area in the entire bone burial ground, and it is also the place with the strongest aura of death. The outer and inner layers of the bone burial ground may not even cover a corner of the central area. Here, it is also the most dangerous place in the burial ground. The skeletons on the periphery were confused and ignorant. The skeleton soldiers in the inner layer actively hunted to improve their strength, and when their strength reached a certain level, they entered the central area. Central region. All skeletons, or in other words, all undead will fight. They seek experience points to improve their level. They also seek job transfer information, intending to upgrade their occupations from basic occupations to advanced occupations, elite occupations, and even warrior occupations. Even on the top floor of the bone burial ground, those high-level undead with the lord profession are still fighting with each other. Strive to go further. Peripheral. Inner layer. Center. The 3 regions form a perfect closed loop. In the player's perception, this is just a huge leveling point. The massive skeletons and various undead are enough to support them through the early stages of their game careers. In Sumu's world, this is a huge killing field. As one of the most brutal races in the second world, Sumu, a skeleton, never had the power to choose freely. Or, just like the sullen skeletons on the outer and inner layers, passively accept the nourishment of the breath of death and become stocked leeks. After the level reaches a certain level, it will be harvested by other skeletons or skeleton soldiers, or, just like those high-level undead in the depths of the burial ground have done countless years ago, they will continue to upgrade, continue to advance, and rise against the trend until they become the monster lord who dominates the party. That is, the boss in the player's mouth. Other than that, there is no other way. Sumu didn't want to die. I don't want to be a leek to be slaughtered. The only thing he can do is to improve his strength as soon as possible and strengthen his power. Until, pierced through the entire burial ground, 17 skeleton soldiers marched into the central area of the bone burial ground. The strong smell of death filled the air, making Sumu feel that he was getting stronger every moment. Of course, passively accepting the nourishment of the breath of death, the powerful speed is naturally incomparable with the active upgrade. Sumu estimated that with his current level, he would only be able to increase one level by surviving here for at least a few months. The strong breath of death naturally gave birth to more powerful skeleton soldiers. Skeletons below level 15 are extremely rare in the central area of the boneyard. Even if such a skeleton breaks into this area, it will be killed in a short period of time and become the nutrients for the growth of other skeletons. Skeleton soldiers of at least level 15 are eligible to survive in this area. The central area is huge. The distribution of skeleton soldiers is also relatively sparse. Half an hour after entering the central area, Sumu encountered the first skeleton soldier in this area. LV-17. Skeleton soldiers. A level 17 skeleton soldier, stronger than any of Sumu's younger brothers. Only if he personally took action, he could kill him unscathed. But why pursue unscathed? When he saw the skeleton soldier, Sumu's mind moved, and 16 skeleton soldiers around him swarmed out and charged towards the level 17 skeleton soldier. After paying the price of a skeleton soldier's broken arm and a skeleton soldier's fracture, the 17th level skeleton soldier was beheaded, and the intact head was sent to Sumu by number 1. Erosion, talent activated. Enslaved skeletons. In just 1 minute, this level 17 skeleton soldier was enslaved and became one of the many skeleton soldiers under Sumu's command. Subsequently, the skeleton army, which has reached 18, started again and moved deeper into the center. After half an hour, the second skeleton soldier appeared in front of Sumu. 17 skeleton soldiers rushed out, and in the shortest time, the skeleton soldier was disabled and handed over to Sumu for slavery. Number of younger brothers, +1. After an hour, the third skeleton soldier appeared in front of Sumu. Number of younger brothers, +1. 2 hours later, the fifth skeleton soldier appeared in front of Sumu. Number of younger brothers, +1. 3 hours later. Erosion, talent is like a cheat. Not only did Sumu have four-dimensional attributes that far exceeded his rank and level, but it also made his power grow rapidly like a snowball. In less than a day after entering the central area, the number of skeleton soldiers under Sumu's command reached as many as 30. When the number of younger brothers reached 30, Sumu no longer blindly pursued the increase in number, but began to raise the level of himself and the many younger brothers under his command. 30 skeleton soldiers, divided into 10 teams, began to hunt in this area. A team of 3 skeleton soldiers ensures that even if they encounter higher-level skeleton soldiers, they can kill them smoothly, turning the skeleton soldiers they encounter into nutrients for their upgrades. In addition, Sumu has spread out a total of 11 teams, which can expand the hunting range and hunt the skeleton soldiers in this area with extremely high efficiency. In this hunting mode, almost every few minutes, a new system prompt will be refreshed on Sumu's attribute panel, which is 10 times more efficient than when he was hunting alone. 1 hour. 2 hours. 5 hours. 10 hours. After a day has passed, Sumu's level has soared from the original level 11 to the current level of 16. The three attributes of strength, agility, and constitution have all gained 5 points of attribute growth. In addition, during this period of time, Sumu personally killed the skeleton soldiers and plundered the attribute values from their bones. At this time, all his four-dimensional attributes, except for the spiritual attributes, had broken through to the 20-point mark. Strength, 23 points. Agility, 21 o'clock. Physique, 25 points. Spirit, 4.5 points. Such an attribute is comparable to a level 30 skeleton soldier. It stands to reason that the lower the monster level, the higher the occupation template, and the greater the future potential. After all, after the career advancement, there is no attribute compensation for the previous level. Suppress the level to get more potential. But this does not apply to Sumu. With the erosion talent, first stack up your own level, and use the attribute growth obtained by leveling up to strengthen yourself. When his level is high enough and his four-dimensional attributes are strong enough, he will hunt down existences higher than himself in a crushing attitude and obtain a higher level occupation template. The lost attributes can be completely made up for by the erosion talent. Even the pile is higher. If possible, he would like to immediately raise his level to the full level of 100, and then slowly seek a higher level occupation to make up for his lost attributes. A level 100 skeleton soldier might not be the match for a level 70 legendary juggernaut, but it's still easy to break through a burial ground. Pity. It's just fantasy. Even with the existence of the skeleton soldier's younger brother, which has increased his own leveling speed tenfold, he still has to hunt step by step to improve his level and strength. Time flies. Just as Sumu beheaded an 18th level skeleton soldier and was about to absorb the essence of its bones, a message suddenly appeared in his mind. Your servant 25th is dead. Just as Sumu was slightly stunned, the second message emerged immediately. Your servant number 27 is dead. Skeletons die in battle, which is normal. This is the central area of the bone burial ground, not to mention a mere skeleton soldier. Even the death of a higher rank skeleton is extremely common. But when letting these little brothers go hunting, Sumu alone ordered them not to go deeper into the burial ground. The fear is that there are higher order skeletons in the deeper areas. In more than a day, number 25 and 27-inch had already raised their level to level 17. A team of 3 skeleton soldiers acted together, but number 25 and number 27 were killed in less than 2 seconds. Could it be that there are high-level skeletons appearing in this area? Too late to think about it. Sumu took over the control of the 26th skeleton soldier for the first time. Vision shift. When Sumu's own vision was replaced by the vision of the number 26 skeleton soldier, he only saw a dozen or so skeleton soldiers surrounded by an extraordinarily strong tall skeleton. And that skeleton, which is a little taller and stronger than the current Sumu, is holding a two-handed sword high and slashing towards the number 26 skeleton soldier. Pale white edge flashed. When Sumu's vision turned back to his own, a third message emerged from his mind. Your servant number 26 has died. Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.